Hi, everybody, and welcome to the second season of Literature Berks. My name is Amanda Hornberger, and I'm the program director at the Jewish Federation of Reading Berks and the co-chair of Literature Berks. On behalf of our entire Literature Berks committee, I'm thrilled to welcome you to this series of programs. Literature Berks is a community-wide celebration of books and authors presented by the Jewish Federation of Reading Berks in partnership with the Exeter Community Library, the Sinking Spring Public Library, and the Jewish Book Council. In the chat, you will see a link to purchase a signed copy of Careful What You Wish For through our official book vendor, Reads and Company Bookshop. Literature Berks is happy to support a local independent bookstore, and we encourage you to continue to shop local during this time. Remember that books always make great gifts. Throughout the webinar, feel free to type any questions you may have into the Q&A function. I'm thrilled that Mallory Hoffman, the library director from Exeter Community Library, is here tonight to help facilitate our conversation, and she will help answer questions and guide them throughout the program. Hallie Ephron is an Edgar Award finalist and a 5-time finalist for the Mary Higgins Clark Award, and she writes books that she hopes readers can't put down. She's the New York Times bestselling author of Never Tell a Lie, Come and Find Me, There Was an Old Woman, Night Night, Sleep Tight, and You'll Never Know, Dear. She grew up in Beverly Hills, the daughter of a Hollywood screenwriters, and lives near Boston, Massachusetts. I am honored to welcome Hallie Ephron to Literature Berks.
I am honored to be here. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Mallory. Thank you, Literature Berks. And I'm still getting used to the Zoom format, so I can see that how many participants there are, but I wish I could see your faces and connect, but it is not to be. You did a great introduction, so I'm going to skip over all of that. Thank you. I'm going to talk today about growing up in a family of writers, my slow, laborious process for becoming a published writer, and best of all, my new book, which is called Careful What You Wish For. And you can see the little well-placed PR behind me there. I grew up in a family of writers, and I grew up in Beverly Hills, and both of those things affected me. My parents were screenwriters, and so I kind of felt like I got Hollywoodized. So if you read my books, they'll feel a little bit like movies, I hope, and particularly a little Alfred Hitchcocky. That kind of feeling that something's going to happen and you don't know what it is. On the other hand, I don't write icky, I write creepy. And I always try to walk that line between icky and creepy. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to share my screen and talk to you a little bit about growing up in a family of writers. People always want to know, is Nora your sister? Yes, Nora was my sister. She was my older sister. There were 4 of us. There are 3 of us now, and we're all writers. And my mother was a writer and my father was a writer. So I feel like I came by it honestly. I got the genes. Having said that, it took me a long time to get with the program. So let me see if I can bring up the right screen here. Let's see. There, that's working, right? Okay, so this is the house we grew up in Beverly Hills. That's my family. That's me on the left when I must have been about 7 years old. That's Delia next to me with she hated that dress, with the red bow tie. My dad looking his ever gregarious self. My mother, and that's Amy in her lap. Amy is a well-published author. And of course, on the right, there's Nora. And as you may notice, both Delia and Amy are like targeted on her. She was a gravitational field, let's put it that way. Anyway, the house was filled with books and girls and writers. My mother had been an English major, and she was really good about stocking the house with books that were good for girls to read. It's a little bit different then than it is now, in that it was not that easy to find a book with a girl who was adventurous and not just a helper to the boys. But we had all those books. We had the Oz books with Ozma and Dorothy, and on from there. Lucy Maud Montgomery books and so on. So my mother really tried to make us strong women as she was. Um, this is her, my mother, with baby Nora in 1941, and she's sitting in a window that overlooks, I think it overlooks 116th Street and Broadway, which is where she was living. She had gone to Evander Childs High School, and then she had gotten herself a job as a secretary to a Broadway producer. And she met my dad, who had gotten himself thrown out of Cornell for stealing books and was also on Broadway being a stage manager. He talked himself into a job. And they met and they married. And my mother had Nora. And in those days, when you had a baby, in fact, when you got pregnant, you couldn't keep working. Now, my mother was a hard drinking, hard smoking, hard working, and woman in parenthesis, it really wasn't the main thing. And I can only imagine what it must have been like for her. A baby living, they had to move in with her parents. It was the Depression. They weren't making enough money. And there they were. She would be walking up and down Riverside Park with a baby carriage. She must have been miserable. I can't even imagine it. Meanwhile, my dad was writing plays during the day and working at night, and he kept churning them out, and none of the people that he was connected to wanted to back them. It takes money to put on a play. So he turned to my mother when she was home with the baby and said, "Don't go back to work. Let's write a play together," because he knew, I think, that he could write a good play. He just didn't have a great idea. And my mother was really smart and tuned in the way my sister Nora was tuned into what's going on in social circles. And they wrote a play together called Three as a Family. It's about a young couple. They get married, they have a baby, she has to leave work, they have to move in with her family. So it was their story turned into a comedy. And that is something my family has always done, is you take the pain, you take the hard things, and you make people laugh at them. And that's one form of comedy. It got backing, it ran thousands of performances on Broadway, and it gave them a ticket to Hollywood. Because in those days, Hollywood was just starting to get going and they needed writers. And so lots of writers from Broadway were lured to Hollywood. Before they left, this is Eleanor Roosevelt came to see Three as a Family, and I can imagine what an amazing moment that must have been for both of my parents. That's my mother. Look how young she is. I mean, she's not even 30 years old, and there she is, a playwright. So from there, they went to the West Coast. In those days, you didn't fly there. You couldn't fly. You took the train. You took the Super Chief to New York, and then they landed jobs at 20th Century Fox. And this is the publicity picture that the Fox Studios would have put out if anyone wanted to know about my parents. So these are PR shots. My mother at the typewriter, completely makes sense. She typed amazingly well. And in those days, it was 3 carbon copies. I mean, just imagine what that was like. It's like life without Pampers. And then my dad at the typewriter, he couldn't type a word. He was all one finger typing, but they put him there at the same typewriter notice as my mother, but they only had one typewriter in the office because he didn't know how to type. But their collaboration was not one in which he wrote and she typed. It was a real partnership. They came up with story together, and then she would take notes, and then she would write it out on the typewriter, and he would read it, and they would go over it. So it was really a partnership. She was not the secretary to his brilliant mind. They were a partnership, and he knew it. and gave her credit always. If you ever see a credit on their movies, it always says Phoebe and Henry Ephron, her name first. That's what she negotiated. She said otherwise she wanted it to be Phoebe Walkind, which was her unmarried name. So she was ahead of of herself in a lot of ways as an emancipated woman. Okay, so this is me at a year old. No, not even a year old. What do you think? 6 months, I think, maybe 5 months, drooling. There's Nora on my mother's right, who is always the belle of the ball, always the center of attention, and my sister Delia on the bottom. And I'm squirming to get out of my mother's arms because I would much rather be with my sisters than up there with my mom. And my parents were writers in Hollywood's golden era. It was really a wonderful time. And they would write movie after movie after, it's not like now. Now, the poor kids who are trying to write screenplays now are writing them all on spec. They don't get paid. They try to find someone who's interested. It's a real rat race. Then you had an office, you got a secretary, you had lunch in the commissary, and you got assigned movie after movie after movie, and they all got made. They got cast, they got made. Here are some of their better known ones. Desk Set, my favorite, with Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, the first movie with a computer as a character. The wonderful Rodgers and Hammerstein's Carousel with Gordon McRae and Shirley Jones. The fabulous Daddy Longlegs with Fred Astaire and Leslie Caron, with what really would have been a questionable plot today. She's like a 17-year-old and he's like a 50-something-year-old. And anyway, that's what you could get away with in those days. Was a very different kind of story than today. But the dancing was sublime. And I got to go on the sets of some of these shows at 20th Century Fox. And it was really a pretty amazing time. And then my mother, in the meanwhile, wrote the only thing she ever wrote by herself, which was a play called Howie. And it was her own work. It was based on someone, the Howie character was someone in her family. It's a comedy. And it played on Broadway. It was backed and played. And this is from the New York Times article about interviewing her in 1958. The interviewer said, "She's slim, 5'6" and weighs 120 pounds. She's vivacious and witty and could pass for Rosalind Russell. I'll kill you if you describe me coming out of the kitchen with flour on my hands and sitting down and writing funny lines. I don't go into the kitchen very often, except for ice cubes for a drink. We have a cook for the cooking and a nurse for the children. I've been a full-time screenwriter since 1943, and I put in a full day at the office." Like I said, she was hard drinking, hard smoking. She was one tough cookie, and not that easy to have for a mother, to tell you the truth. She was complicated. So when I tell you that 13 years later she died of cirrhosis, you might have seen that coming a little bit in the way that she presented herself. She was, it's a shame, really. I think if she had been a decade later, she could have gotten help. But, in those days, women who were depressed and had alcoholism didn't feel comfortable speaking about it. And there certainly wasn't the kind of medication or doctor's help that is available today. So she died much too young, and living with her in the last almost 30 years of her life, 20 years of her life, was very difficult for us as kids. What was going on at home wasn't what you would expect from a wealthy Hollywood family. It was very difficult. And when she was dying, and cirrhosis is something that kills you slowly, and mercilessly. It's a terrible death. Um, Nora famously was sitting and talking to her at the hospital, and my mother said, "You're a writer, take notes. Everything is copy." And again, she was hard drinking, hard smoking. She was tough. And she meant that. I mean, she would have turned her own life, the tragedy of her life, into a comedy if she had survived to tell it. And the rest of us haven't been quite able to do that. Um, what happened to me was that I learned from her. I kind of learned a bad lesson, which was if you try to write, you might become, uh, you might not be healthy. It might not be a good thing. And so I came out of the chute saying, I'm not a writer. I don't want to be that person that she was. And if I write, maybe that's what will happen to me. Well, that's crazy. You know that, right? But I still believed it. And for a long time, I said, I don't write, I'm a teacher. And the truth is, I am a teacher. It's the thing that I do the best. I came out of college. I worked in the New York City public schools for about 6 years. I moved to Boston. I worked in Boston schools. I went on and became a college professor, teaching people to be teachers. I got a doctorate. I went into high tech, doing training. And so my whole 20, 30 years of my career, first 30 years of my career, were teaching in various guises. And I loved it. And it wasn't until I was 30 years later, after college, after my mother's death, that I finally got the courage to write. And I think it was as much because my daughter, and that's my daughter in the pink there, my older daughter, Molly. When I started writing, she was the age that I was when my mother died. So I think I kind of felt like I had escaped the hex. I could do something and not become an alcoholic. Um, but I felt like I had nothing to say because what had I been? I'd been a mother, a sister, a teacher, worked in high tech. This is all pretty boring stuff. And I did want to write something personal. So I teamed up with a co-author and wrote a mystery series based loosely on his experience as a forensic neuropsychologist who evaluates people accused of murder. And we wrote 5 mystery novels for St. Martin's Press, and they did pretty well. And by the time we were done with that, I got the courage to say, I want to write alone. I know I can write and I can trust my own experience. And so my first novel written alone was called Never Tell a Lie. It was published in 2009. And I found the idea at a yard sale. I went to a yard sale around the corner from where I live, and the woman was getting rid of all of this old stuff that had been in the house. And I knew the previous owners. There were new owners. So I knew all this stuff. My daughter used to play there. I knew the bedroom furnishings. I knew everything. And so I would chat her up in the driveway and talk about what had they done, because I knew that they had a decorator van and a builder. And I was fascinated to know what they'd done. In the meanwhile, I'm buying some stuff, of course. And she invited me to go in the house and look around. Well, that is really creepy, walking into someone else's empty house and looking around. And I thought, what if, finally, the mystery writer in me kicks in. I think, what if a woman goes to a yard sale? Somehow she talks her way into the house. She goes inside and she never comes out. Woo! I thought, I have an idea for a book, my book, my book. And of course, I ran home. I completely spooked myself. And I started writing. And I realized by the time I got home that the woman having the yard sale would be 9 months pregnant, about to have a baby, because that's when you have yard sales, is you get rid of everything to make room for the baby. And the woman who comes to the yard sale and disappears, she's 9 months pregnant too. And they know each other from high school. So I was also getting a chance to write about having my first child. So instead of writing about being a teacher or working in high tech, I was writing about being a woman and having a child and and having been in the work environment and now being home. I got a starred review in Publishers Weekly. They called it deliciously creepy. It's like my favorite blurb, deliciously creepy. And it was made into a Lifetime Movie Network movie. And so for me, it was a huge deal. This first book that I wrote alone did well, and it got good reviews, and it was made into a movie. So it kind of gave me credibility with my publisher, which has translated into 16 books later. I've written nonfiction, I've written crime fiction, I've written how to write books, I've written books about books. But the new one that's especially near and dear to my heart is called Careful What You Wish For. And it's about a professional organizer who's married to a man who cannot pass a yard sale without stopping. And again, this is something that I know from firsthand experience. I am married to a man who cannot pass a yard sale without buying something, never mind stopping. And in fact, right now, we are doing our 22nd jigsaw puzzle in COVID lockdown. All these jigsaw puzzles that he has brought home from yard sales and stashed in a trunk in the basement. The trunk is now giving it back to us, and we're having a ball because I didn't think I liked jigsaw puzzles, but they're like the perfect COVID-19 lockdown toy, especially when you have someone else to do it with. So in my novel, a professional organizer is married to a man who can't pass a yard sale without stopping, and sometimes she finds herself wondering, does he spark joy? And I never find myself wondering this. And I always tell people the husband in this book is not my husband, but his stuff inspired the book, and his stuff is in the book. All that stuff, the basement, the attic, the garage, all of that, that's him. The jigsaw puzzles, that's all my sweet husband, but he's not at all the character that's in the book. So as I got ready to write this book, I decided that there would be three couples in what my friend who's a professional organizer calls a mixed marriage. In other words, a couple where the husband and wife have different relationships to their stuff. So Emily and Frank are like me and my husband, which is to say, I don't care what I keep, and Jerry is always saving, saving, saving. So we're always at odds that way. There's Quinn and Walter. Walter is a connoisseur collector. It's a different kind of collector from somebody who goes to yard sales. He's got, vintage signs from particular eras. He knows which ones he wants to flesh out his collection. He collects masks. He collects specific categories of things. And he's always looking like for the great white whale, the one that he doesn't have. And Quinn doesn't care about stuff at all. She married him 3 years ago. And he won't let her bring any of the furniture that she owned before she married him into their house. So he's controlling her. Then there's Ruth and Murph. Now, Murph is dead, and he collected all kinds of things. But when Ruth goes through his things a year after he dies, finally ready to deal with them, she's been unable to throw away even the coffee mug he was drinking from the day he died. She discovers the key to a storage unit. And when Emily goes to investigate for her what is in this storage unit that the wife didn't know about, there's more than a few surprises in it, and there is no severed head. Remember what I said? I write creepy, not icky. So there's no severed head but there is really interesting stuff that I wish I tripped over at a yard sale, and I had fun writing about it, fun researching it. There's old maps and old books and just the kind of thing that I would anyway, really enjoy figuring out if I found them. So that's Careful What You Wish For. And there's the storage unit. Do you know that something like 15% of Americans have a storage unit. I was so shocked when I read that figure. I mean, we really are somehow into our stuff, and that's really why I wanted to write this book. The opening line is, Emily Harlow wasn't convinced that her sock drawer sparked joy. And I always laugh when I read that. And people ask, obviously, did Marie Kondo inspire me? Since that is her statement, to spark joy. You know, you should keep only those things, she says, that spark joy. And the truth is, I just got lucky with Marie Kondo. I've been writing bits and pieces of this book since I first started writing. And the first things I started to write way back when, way back when, and I'm talking 20, 30 years ago, before I was published, I wrote a lot of essays about my husband and his crazy collecting, not surprising. And they were all kind of funny. Here's a piece that I wrote in 1998. This morning, my 90-year-old neighbor was up on a stepladder washing the 8 windows that surround her porch. After that, she vacuumed her sidewalk. The cord snaked like an umbilicus up the steps and through her front door. By the street, she set out tidy rows of paint cans alongside pieces of lumber and plumbing innards. Beside these, she planted a sign, hand-lettered sign, free. Just watching her inspires me. Suddenly, I'm ready to tackle the walk-in closet that I haven't been able to walk into for months. I know my husband will be inspired as well, inspired to clean the gutters and rake the lawn, so he'll be in position to grab off any of the neat stuff she throws out. So I was writing about my husband. That is practically verbatim in the book. I hauled it up, and anyone who's a writer out there and listening, don't throw anything away. The stuff that you write early on, it's compost. You're going to be able to use it later, and you'll have such a fresh view of it that will become dim if you try to look back, as I did 30 years later, or even 20 years later. So I'd been writing about being married to a man who's wedded to his stuff long before Marie Kondo, I think, she was probably about 14 years old in 1998. The other thing that inspired Careful What You Wish For is Strangers on a Train. In it, a couple of fellows meet accidentally. There's no connection between them at all. They've never seen each other. And this is actually from the book. Bruno says, it's so simple too. A couple of fellows meet accidentally like you and me. No connection between them at all. Never saw each other before. Each of them has somebody they'd like to get rid of. But he can't murder the person he wants to get rid of. He'll get caught. So they swap murders. Patricia Highsmith had a really sneaky mind, and that story has always stuck with me. And so in my story, it's just really a story about 2 wives who are different levels of unhappy with their husbands, wishing they could, click the off button. And then over some champagne, some Prosecco actually, they talk about what might it be like if they could get rid of their husbands. And that's the book. So, as I said, my husband did not inspire the character, but this is his stuff. I mean, we have, that is a scale. We have about 30 fans in the basement, copper, steel. We have bookshelves and bookshelves of bird books. There's not enough. There's probably more bird books on my shelf than there are birds. And of course, this is what my husband carries around in his pocket. You can't have one pen. No, you've got to have 17 of them. He's a little nuts. So I want to check. I'm not going to do this, but sometimes at this point in the presentation, I read a little bit from the book. But it is 7:30, so I don't want to do that unless there.
You're more than welcome to. Please go ahead.
Good. Then I'll just read a little bit here. Hang on. Had it been inevitable that Frank would become a rabbit collector, genetic even, when they'd helped clean out Frank's grandfather's apartment 2 years ago, there'd been piles of newspaper clippings going back to the 40s. And what was a man whom she'd never seen dressed up except at their wedding doing with suits and sport jackets hanging double deep in his closets? Turned out the pockets were an elaborate filing system. Frank had reached confidently into the breast pocket of the sport jacket and brought out a handful of solid silver quarters and dimes. From the pants pocket, a $1 bill with a printing error. A penny wrapped in a bit of toilet paper had a double date stamp. The rest of his grandfather's treasures included a worthless stash of 1964 World's Fair potholders and a mountain of hotel soaps and shampoos. Frank had probably saved it all. Only God and Frank knew where. At their wedding, Frank's mother had confided to Emily that Frank's first word had been mine. Back then, Frank's redeeming features seemed to far outweigh what Emily then thought of his quirky passion for collecting. He was handsome as hell with that $1 million smile. He was smart. He laughed at her jokes, and he didn't screw around like his law partner, Ryan, who recently divorced wife number 2 and was already cheating on his new girlfriend. She turned her attention back to the jumpsuit. Emily is smoothing a jumpsuit that she bought years ago, trying to decide whether to keep it or not. Ran her hands once again over the soft fabric, imagining that the jumpsuit was Frank himself. Gently, she smoothed him, straightened his shoulders, unkinked his legs. Keep or toss? She was considering when she heard a thud, probably the steel bulkhead door to their basement slamming shut. She looked out the window in time to see Frank climbing into his car. No sooner had he pulled out of the driveway when there was a loud, discordant crash from the bowels of the house. Echoes sent a chill down Emily's spine. What on earth had he dragged home this time? So that's from the beginning of Careful What You Wish For. And one of the best thing that's ever happened to me in my career as a writer is getting this review for this book. My editor called me, and now when your editor calls you, it's either good news or bad news. They do not call you. It's just doesn't happen. So she said, "You're going to be in time." And I thought, in time for what? The likelihood that I would get reviewed in Time magazine just was not on my radar. And yet here it is, a full-page review, Cleaning Up Crime, written by Jamie Lee Curtis. I am such a Jamie Lee Curtis fan. I mean, we both grew up in Hollywood families. She's a writer. She let her hair go gray. She writes kids' books. And I mean, anyway, here's what she wrote. She said, "You might be surprised to hear that I don't like mysteries. Life is terrifying enough without trying to identify the perpetrators of crimes and how they pulled it off. I hate watching horror films." I know. Remember, she's in Halloween, isn't she? It's like, or anything scary. But Careful What You Wish For is not scary. It's thrilling and suspenseful. I found a compelling companion to Emily, a modern-day grown-up Nancy Drew in a shitty car and a ponytail as she searches for her own purpose while hunting down the perpetrator of an emerging crime. She is a friend we would all want to keep, messes included. So, there are a few high points in a writer's life. Getting nominated for an award is always nice, but this was so unexpected and so generous. And I just think she's, she walks on water. She's funny. She doesn't take herself too seriously. She's terrific. And there she is saying she liked my book. So this was a pretty high point. The book also got a starred review in Publishers Weekly, which called it outstanding. It was named one of August's best books by the Christian Science Monitor. And it was a #1 bestseller here near me in the Boston area. So it's been a nice ride with this book. I hope some of you will want to read it. It's perfect for lockdown. It's a page turner. It will pick you up at the beginning, and every chapter hooks to the next, and it's an easy read. I'm saying this because right now I'm reading all of the Harry Potter books. Talk about, I'm in the middle of the last one, and I'm so sad that I'm going to be out of them very shortly. But that's what my book is like. Not that I'm anywhere near the writer that she is, but they're fun. So that's me. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, actually, sort of, though I don't really do much on Twitter. But there's my webpage. And if you have any reason to email me, I do respond to my emails. You can go to my webpage and click on the contact button, and the email goes right to me. Particularly if you read the book and you have any questions. If you see anything in there that isn't working, don't tell me. But so, Mallory, can we?
Absolutely. Hallie, I need to tell you that I read the book. I sat down, I was like, I'm going to start this. I read it in one day. I couldn't get up. I didn't I was just like, well, nothing else is getting done today because I can't put this book down. I loved it. It was so fun. And just, like you said, it's not icky. It just was your perfect, thriller. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for writing it.
Yeah. Well, no, it took me 2 years to write it. So when people say I read it.
Are you reading Harry Potter for the first time?
No, it's probably
Okay.
the second time. It's actually probably
Okay.
the second time, but it's amazing how much I don't remember.
Yep.
Yeah, particularly the last book, which is difficult, I would say, relative to the others. I mean, the first book is a dream. It's so great. Actually, I mean, I love them all, and I wish there were 2 more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same. So there are a few questions in the chat. Nancy is curious, how difficult is it for you yourself to be reviewed by your peers since you were a crime fiction reviewer for the Boston Globe?
It's a really good question. I learned so much reviewing crime fiction. I reviewed for 12 years for the Boston Globe. And I'll just tell you briefly, they didn't tell me what to review. I had a monthly column, and I would get upwards of 40 to 80 books a month delivered to my house. And I had to pick 3 to review. So as much of the problem was deciding what books to review. And usually I just looked for ones. I tried to be inclusive in terms of men, women, and et cetera, just to, and historical versus everyday versus a little romance, just to mix it up. Because I realized, lots of people like different kinds of books. But I tried to find 3 books that I liked. I really don't see the point, if you have a column like that, why tell people about books that you don't like? Why not find books that you can recommend? So I never lied. I never sugarcoated it. What I did was I would start a book and put it down and start a book and put it down and start until I found 3 that I really liked. Now, as a librarian, you must have that happen all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and your taste isn't everybody's taste, and you realize that, so you try to put yourself in their shoes. So, and the other thing that I know as a writer is I hate it when reviewers, it's as if they write the review to show how smart and snappy they can be. That's not really why you're writing a review. You're writing a review to tell readers whether this book is read-worthy, and not to put yourself on a I'm smarter than you pedestal. So I've always also been very conscious of that and try not to take pot shots, try not to be too cute. And remember that the person who wrote the book is a human being, even if it's a terrible book. they're not a terrible human being. And
Right.
what is the point of making somebody hurt? I see this a lot in Amazon reviews. I think people, I don't read, I try not to go into my reviews of my book, because I think it can just stick with you in an icky way, you know. It's the book is finished. I can't fix it, you know. Anyway, so that's a
Yeah.
roundabout. Who was it who asked that question?
Nancy.
Nancy, if you have any follow-up, just type it in.
Deb is curious if you would please talk about your relationship with your father.
Oh, nobody has asked that. Isn't that interesting? Well, my father was a charming, he was president of a senior class at high school. He was generous to people. He was welcoming. He was funny. He was a storyteller. He was also a philanderer. And I can't separate that from everything else when I look back on him. I just, I mean, I'm sure that's why my mother drank as much as she did, because he was, you know, fooling around. And he was flawed. Yeah. But I mean, I will tell you one thing about our parents, both of them, and my father in particular. They adored us in a way that I have realized is so important for children to feel that unconditional love that you just have to let kids know how much you adore them, even if they're driving you crazy at that moment. I mean, yeah, you can, you know, certainly say, I don't like it that you did thus and such, but I adore you. I love you. You are the cat's pajamas. And they absolutely did that. And the other thing that he did was he laughed at our jokes. I mean, he was such a great audience. So both of my parents were a very mixed bag. And, you know, that's people are like that.
Yeah. Laura just has a comment. She knew you must be a teacher or have a teacher in your life by the way you talked about bulletin boards.
Bulletin boards. Well, you know, I did, is she, I ask her, is she, are you teaching now? Is she teaching now?
See if she responds here.
Because what I was wondering is, do people still buy? I mean, when I was a teacher, and I of course put this in the book, the first thing you do in the fall was you would go to the teaching supply store and get all this wonderful corrugated paper and so on for your bulletin board and your borders. And it was such a satisfying thing to prepare your classroom for the year. And I've wondered if teachers still do that, because it's been a while since I was in the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do. I haven't been in my kids' classrooms this year because we're, you know, we're not allowed. But so Laura, I can't see anybody. So she's one of our youth services librarians at the library. So, but she has teaching background. So yes, she's very familiar with bulletin boards.
Yeah, well, that's so funny, because I was drawing completely from experience on that.
Yeah.
And what was I going to say? Yeah, the other thing that's true of me, that's true of the character, is she left. The character Emily leaves teaching in part because she finds all the testing sort of takes the heart and soul out of the work. And I taught, you know, before tests, but I got a PhD in testing, in measurement. So I'm like an expert on how to design a standardized test, how to use the results, how not to use the results. And so I was able to put a lot of my negative feeling about the way tests are used in schools into my character. And that really was I mean, that's the fun about writing is even though you're writing something completely fiction, it's all you. I mean, it's all stuff that, even if it's twisted and reshaped and varnished, it's, you know, my mother is in my books, my father is in my books, my husband and his stuff are in my books, you know. And in some ways, in some weird ways, even though the books are all very different, and all my 16 of my books are very different, I'm always kind of wrestling with the same ideas, with the same core. And I think you find that when you read a body of work by an author, is you find that they are reworking, taking this problem and turning it sideways and with the new book. And we just it's the best. It's the good thing about writing is it's cheaper than therapy,
Yeah.
but it takes longer.
I agree with what you said. I find myself reading, and if I find an author that I really like, I'll try another one. And then I'm like, I think I would really like this person, because you can tell that it's them, that, you know, they're writing it. So it really, it's fascinating that you said that.
It's an attitude and a voice and a perspective on the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So Deb is curious if your Jewish culture influences your writing.
I get that question, of course, because I'm doing a number of Jewish groups. And the answer is yes, but not in a religious way. Culturally, oh my goodness. I mean, my parents were part of a wave of Jewish writers who their parents, you know, spoke Yiddish, not English. They came to this country, went into the garment business or the rug business. You know, they lived in the Bronx, they lived in Brooklyn. They went to Temple. My dad, my grandparents wanted my dad to be a rabbi. He was so bright. And just so growing up, they were not religious parents. We didn't belong to Temple. But I always felt Jewish. I mean, in a good way, in a way that made me feel like there was a history behind me, and but not necessarily stories from the Bible. You know, not religious. But oh my goodness, the food. I mean, I think is there such a thing as culinary Judaism? You know, the potato pan. My mother was a big foodie, and so you know, a lot of the foods we ate were things that she had grown up with, and so kind of. I mean, you know, in when we were growing up in Hollywood, we were surrounded by other Jewish writers, and the ones that I knew well who had kids my age, you know, they would have Christmas trees. It's I mean, I don't have a Christmas tree now, but then it was a really I don't know if they were denying or simply enjoying the I mean, there was nothing religious about our Christmas tree. It was all about Santa Claus, not the baby Jesus, that's for sure. But we sang, my mother would sit at the piano and play Christmas carols. So we had a very, I don't know, ecumenical growing up, and still felt extremely linked to the Jewish culture.
There's a question from Kathy. Do you have any crime or mystery authors that you enjoy?
Oh, goodness. Let me count the ways. There are so many. First of all, let me put in a plug for Jungle Red Writers. That's the blog that I'm on. Jungle Red Writers, one word.com, is really fun. There are 7 of us, and they're all wonderful writers. So Reese Bowen writes historical kind of, so like she has a Lady Georgie mystery about a royal who's not very wealthy, and she's wrote The Tuscan Child, which was a #1 bestseller for ages on Amazon. She's a wonderful writer. Deborah Crombie, Hank Philippi Ryan, Lucy Burdett writes wonderful mystery stories, culinary mysteries set in Key West. And who am I leaving out? Julia Spencer Fleming, who writes about Maine and has 2 characters as her main characters. Did I forget anybody? Oh, Jen McKinley. Oh gosh, especially if you have any young readers, women in their 30s. Jen McKinley is terrific. She's very prolific. She's got romances. She's got cozy novels, and she's got some women's fiction. She's one of these people who writes 3 books a year. I mean, I'm a book every 2 years if I'm lucky. So I am in awe of her. So those are people. I also love Lee Child. I like Connolly, all the classics, Agatha Christie.
Mm.
I can reread Barbara Pym. That's who I think I'll read after I'm done with Harry Potter. I've got so many authors, and the fun thing on Jungle Red is we are always hosting authors with new books, so you can get a feeling for whether that's a book that you might like to read. So Jungle Red Writers, stop by, and we have great commenters. We have such a wonderful community.
Great, thank you. Sue says, thank you for a wonderful speech.
Thank you.
And she's just curious if your other sisters write.
Oh, yes, indeed. Everybody writes. Let's see. Amy, I'm looking over at my bookshelf there. Hang on. Oh, I thought I could just snag one of her books. Amy Ephron writes junior high kind of fantasy novels, and they're really fun. They're really a delight. That's what she's doing right now, but she's written all kinds of books before that. My sister Delia wrote a book. Her last book, I think, was called Syracusa, which is being made into a movie, and it's about it's a really creepy story about a vacation in Syracusa, which is in Italy. She's a terrific writer. So all of us are writers. I think I once tried to count up all of our books, and I think it gets up to 70 something if you add all the books that we've written collectively. Yeah, but we don't write the same things. That's one of the nice things is I am hoping none of them start writing mystery novels. I'll be pissed. Yeah, no, that's my turf. And and Delia writes. Delia got her start with a book called How to Eat Like a Child, which was a #1. It started out as it used to be the New York Times magazine had an essay on the back page. I'm dating myself now. I don't know what's on the back page of the magazine these days. The weekly magazine, the Sunday magazine. And it was a brief piece from this book called How to Eat Like a Child. But it was called How to Eat Like a Child. And it blew up. I mean, it was one of those viral things before there was an internet. And she got a book contract based on it, and it was a best-selling book, and they turned it into a play. And that was her career, took off with that. So yeah, but Nora's the big name. Nora was extraordinary. Probably, I would think, the best essay writer of her generation, and such a shame that she died. She was vigorous and writing right up until the end, and she would have just kept on going. It was very unfair.
Yeah. A couple people are asking about your next book.
My next book. Well, I am working on something, but I don't like to talk about it. But it's a little bit inspired by having children in Brooklyn.
Okay.
I have 2 daughters in Brooklyn, and for a while they were living in the same brownstone on adjacent floors. And I sort of thought, I would love to move in on the top floor.
Yeah. And
then that inspired me to think about, well, what might have happened if So I'm toying with that. I haven't gotten very far, though. This epidemic has really knocked me for a loop. I don't know if people are finding that they're more productive. I find I'm much less productive. I find the busier I am, the more I get done. And so this being home, just
agree.
Not good for the work ethic.
Yeah. So while you've been home, Laura is curious, what TV or movies have you enjoyed recently?
Oh, well, I would start with Orthodox, given that I'm talking
to
Oh my God, that was so I have a Netflix and a Amazon and PBS public television. So I'm pretty much just there, but that I thought was one of the best things I've seen, period.
Okay.
Television or anywhere. And I love the Great British Baking Show. And it's so funny, I know how all of them end, and yet I can watch those episodes over and over and over again.
Yeah,
It's really calming.
that's true. Yeah. Let's see. I think I have a few other questions. Nancy is curious what books are on your to be read pile.
On my to be read pile, Nickel Boys, which I haven't read yet.
Okay.
Have you all read that? I'll hang on.
I read the audio. The audio is very good.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
That's what I would love, is an audio subscription, but I don't have that. So I've got the Nickel Boys. I've got Hank Phillippe Ryan's new book, The First to Lie. I've got Whitney Scherer's The Age of Light. I have a Louise Penny. I don't think that's her last one. And I have Chris Castellini's Leading Men. And then I have something on my Kindle called, it's by Jess Walter. It's his new book. I'm a big fan of his. So I have a lot of reading.
So here's a question for you, since you mentioned your Kindle. What is your preferred reading format?
I'm getting used to the Kindle,
Okay.
mostly because I don't want to go into a bookstore, and it's too complicated sometimes to, when I see something I want to read, normally I would be in a bookstore anyway, and I would buy it there. But so with COVID, I've gotten to know my Kindle much better, and
Okay.
yeah, so it's okay. It's not my favorite way to read. I would rather read a book. But when you take a walk, sometimes then you sit down and you want to read. It's nice not to be schlepping a big heavy book too.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, it's got its advantages. I don't really. It depends on the kind of book.
Yeah. Nancy also is asking, she read that you're an amateur birder. Any exciting sightings that you'd like to tell us about?
Oh my goodness. Well, right now, the only thing, I'm in the Boston area. So of course, all we have, if we look out our window, are sparrows and snowbirds, which are also called juncos. Yeah. So, and the occasional blue jay. And there's not a lot going on right now, that's for sure. But exactly a year ago, we were in Panama and for a birding trip. And I so recommend anybody who, has an interest in birds to go somewhere like that, a place that is set up for birding, especially if you have if you can walk a long distance. You do need to be able to walk a fair amount. And but that was amazing. I mean, every time you would sit down, they have feeders set up, and you're sitting, maybe 10 feet away, and just watching the hummingbirds come in, and the grosbeaks and the wood rails, and it's amazing. And then you're also surrounded by better birders. Birding is like tennis. You should always play tennis with somebody better than you, because a little bit better, not too much better, because you play better with someone who's a little better than you. And that's true with birding too. It's better to go birding with people who have some better idea of what they're looking at than you do, because otherwise it's a little overwhelming. You see a bird, and then you open the book, and there's all these pages, and all these yellow birds look just like that bird. But if you're with people who know what they're doing, and they love to help you, it's a lovely community, the birding community. I've met some of the nicest people. Yeah. So here we don't have much. It's winter, winter in New England. And
Yeah.
even waking up in the morning, I don't hear any birds. And in the
Oh.
spring, it's like, the anvil chorus out there.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. My daughter is obsessed with birds, so I
Oh,
learn a lot from her.
how old is she?
She's 9.
Oh,
Yeah,
did you get
she's
her binoculars?
yep. Oh yes. Yep, she has a big bird book, and she could tell you what everything is outside, and it's,
Oh, hey.
like I would have never known. I wouldn't have bothered, but she makes it fascinating. She tells us what everything is, and it's really fun.
Yeah.
So
No, birds are great. I just like the idea of going somewhere, and I always felt like I'd love to know what all the wildflowers are, or know geology, or know something,
yes.
so that when you took a walk in the woods, you could look at stuff and say, oh, that's a this and that's a that, and you have some framework to hang things on. And birding is like that. You could
Yeah.
be walking in the woods and you hear scuffling in the leaves, and you know what kind of bird you're looking for, and you know where they're going to be, and it's cool.
But it is really cool. I'm enjoying it. So I think I just have one more question from Nancy about how you write, whether it's a certain time every day, alone, if you have a writer's group, how does a book start for you? Whether it starts as just an image or a little tidbit.
Yeah, I think every book starts differently. Usually, now this is going to sound weird, my books start with a house. So yeah, I know that sounds strange. So for instance, I told you the one I'm working on, the 3 generations
Mm-hmm.
are in a house in Brooklyn. I mean, that's where
Okay.
I'm starting, is in that house. And
Okay.
and you see, there's a house on the cover of this book, Careful What You Wish For. And that's really where I start, and with an idea. So I started Careful What You Wish For with the house, and also the idea that a woman who's married to a man who can't pass a yard sale without stopping, and she's a professional organizer who helps people get rid of stuff. So you've got conflict. So there's usually a setting and conflict. There needs to be those 2 things for me to get going. And then the character evolves, and you start developing them. I do write from beginning to end. I know there are authors who can write the final scene first. No way. I have to start at page 1, and I usually do a little outlining before I start writing, but not too much, because it's a waste of time. I will immediately go off the outline anyway. But it's like training wheels, it helps me get started. And then I add to the outline, and I revise the outline, so that by the time I'm done with a book, I have an outline that resembles what I wrote, even though I've edited it a million times and changed my mind. Uh, the the thing that is hard about the kinds of books that I write is they're mystery novels at their core, suspense, mystery, thrillers, whatever you want to call them. And so there's 2 things going on in the book. One is what really happened. So maybe in Careful What You Wish For, um, there is a murder, and I know, or I think I know, who did it, and what happened, and what came before it, and why those things happened, and how all the other characters actually feed into it. But what the reader reads isn't that. They read, I reveal some of it, a little bit at a time, and then eventually all the stuff that I know happened will be revealed by the end. So for a writer, you've got 2 things going. You've got what really happened and the order in which it's revealed to the reader. And you have to juggle those 2 and make sure that they work. Because mystery writers are very, very, they notice, if you put a character, if something's supposed to happen at 4 in the afternoon, in a particular place, and the character says somewhere in the book that at that moment they're not there, your readers will pick it up, and they don't like that. It kind of tears the fabric of reality, and it has to feel like it's all solid at the end. One of my favorite movies is The Sixth Sense. Okay, it's like that, in that you don't know what's happening until the end, right? You get to the end and you say, oh my God, he's dead. And then you go back and you reframe in your head all the stuff that you saw. And I want to go back and play the movie again. And that's what I hope people will do with my book. So there's a moment in Careful What You Wish For there's a moment near the end in the storage unit where something unexpected happens. And I know the reader is expecting this to happen, and then that happens. And it's this jarring moment. And I hope for the reader, all of a sudden, it's like the camera goes click, and you understand something that you didn't understand before, and it shades everything that happened earlier. So that's what I'm always working toward. I'm working for that moment where things that looked like this turn like that. And then of course I have to go back, and I have to fix it all and make sure that everybody's queued up in the right places and wearing the right color shoes, all the things that are important for the clues and red herrings in the book, that they all work. But writing a mystery novel isn't for sissies. It's really a juggling act and a structuring act, and not giving things away, and not being too ridiculous in the solution. It has to seem inevitable. The way The Sixth Sense is it just feels so right at the end of that movie. You just feel like you take a deep breath and you think, yeah, that's right. That's what you want people to do at the end.
Yeah, and writing that can't be easy. Someone is asking if you're on Audible.
I am. All of my books are on Audible. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I think we've got one more. What is your writing medium? Typewriter, I should say, it says, or longhand?
Typing, yeah. I taught myself to type when I was 12, and I couldn't get a job, and everybody would say, you need to learn to type. But it actually turned out I needed to be 16. But I did teach myself to type, and I have been an ace typist ever. Yeah, I got little bits of tape, and I put them on the typewriter keys, and I got the little book, and it amazes me that I did that. But I'm a touch typist. I can type really fast. I can type as fast as I can think. So that's the natural way. But I do like to draw pictures. Okay. So, I was talking about, what really happened versus the way you reveal it. I do a lot of timelines with different characters. What do they know in different points in the book? So I can see who knows what when. And that's charting and drawing. So I also think three-dimensionally in terms of plotting. I might do a possibility tree or something to help me get unstuck. I might do that kind of thing. So it's not always typing, but it's typing for getting the words on the page.
Thank you. That was so fun. Thank you, Mallory, for helping.
Sure, that was really fun.
Thank you,
I put a link back to the book in the chat for everybody else. I know our I know our libraries have copies of the books as well. I also read the book. This was like my end of the year reading for 2020, and I agree with Mallory. It was like, this is such a quick read. Like, it was good. It was very engaging. Can't put it down. So I highly recommend. Hallie, thank you so much for joining us. Our next literature Berks event is January 19th at 7 p.m. and I hope to see you there. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you, Hallie.
Thank you.